evidence of things unseen, worthy to be celebrated here on earth and in other dimensions. We give space for celebration throughout our evolution on this earth and in the spirit, wanting to acknowledge that celebration is not limited to just success, but just our own personal milestones. Want to touch on the fact that in different culture, even in grief, even in life, celebration is still needed as a way to process. So in this space today, there are going to be some beautiful conversation and mixes, and we're going to be talking about celebration and in the in-between. So we give space and also give reverence to ancestors with no names. That was super important. So we call on those with benevolent energy, those who have our best interests in mind, those who love on us in the ether, those whose shoulders we stand upon, those who continue to be our backing support, and we thank you. And we also give grace and reverence to ancestors that we do know in this space. We're going to be sharing a meal together. We're going to be communal style. We're going to be talking about all the beautiful things needed in celebratory space. And I would love to start that by having a poem. Won't you celebrate with me? I am more than what you think of me. Better yet, expect of me. More than a human, a mother, a friend, and a lover. A co-creator with God. A cosmic entity, someone, something worth celebration. I am the embodiment of ancestors who bathed in honey and jumped over fire. Named and unnamed, those who forged freedom for others, shifted into portals and vowed to be mirrors. I am the stillness in the night filled with hidden figures and shadows that dance and play in the playground of my thoughts. I am tall, bent, but not broken. Rooted in Earth's core, arms cradling galaxies, hips expanding, birthing nations, worthy of celebration. I am liberated by the tongue, fortified by prayer, and intricately designed by the Most High, free to be. I call on all versions of myself. Won't you celebrate with me?
Black Dynamite, great black exploitation film.
Damn. Black exploitation. That what he going with? That what he going with? Okay. Oh boy, her burger.
Right?
Her burger.
Her burger.
What's black music?
Black music?
Mm-hmm.
Future.
We there.
I could never miss a loss.
To the moon.
I could never miss a loss.
Damn. My boy. What's a black genre?
Jazz.
Black genre.
Jazz. Jazz.
To the moon. Pick number 1 through 3.
Oh, three. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Fast or slow?
Slow.
Okay. We gonna go this way. What is black music?
Black music,
Yeah.
empowerment.
I love that.
What do you think?
Anything I listen to, bitch, I'm black.
Happening.
Okay.
Okay. What's a black film?
Black film. History.
Have y'all watched Moonlight?
Does it have to be one word?
I have.
Be
love
one
Moonlight.
word?
It's up to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
Do what you want to do with it.
okay.
Moonlight is it.
So let's. Last one. What's a black
Jazz.
Like the
Mm.
blues.
Blue.
What's a black
Like
Mm.
the blues.
Blue.
Yeah.
That bluesology.
Scat.
Yeah.
Scat is definitely.
Oh, you ain't
Going
that.
crazy.
Yeah.
Y'all naming the shit though, like
Yes,
shit
of
skis.
course,
Like,
of course.
okay then. I appreciate it. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. Appreciate it. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you.
What's black music?
Black music,
Yeah.
I feel like the sound, the expression, the feelings of what would be considered a black diaspora in all forms. What would be considered a black diaspora in all forms, whether that be through emotive music, whether that be kind of expression, different expression of the art itself, DJing, producing music, creating music. Different expression of the art itself, DJing, producing music. DJing, producing music, creating music, sound itself. I feel like it's very all-encompassing, but it just kind of reaches across and outside of, I guess, what would be considered like stereotypical black or like generic. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Nah, for sure. Yeah. And then what is a black film?
Black film?
Yeah.
Film?
Yeah.
I guess similar. And I guess providing a visual component to what has been stories that have existed within our lives, you know, for years, hundreds of years. That's kind of all black film is, to me at least.
I feel like, because the last one's really what's a black genre, but I feel like you engaged and touched on it. Like, so you treated film media and genre all as like these things that touch the diaspora. It would be almost repetitive. Like,
You can ask it though.
what's a black genre?
I feel like to limit blackness to a specific genre, it would be a little bit hard because I feel like blackness in and of itself is limitless. So trying to subject it to being in one defined categorical box of like being is a bit hard, a little bit rigid. Because I feel like blackness as a whole kind of goes outside of what a genre could be considered, what a specific niche thing is. It exists as itself and is just whatever it is. So blackness in and of itself can't be beyond what would be considered a genre. Blackness is blackness. It's just that. Is that it? Okay, great.
Juneteenth. So happy Juneteenth. How you been enjoying your day so far?
Pretty good, thank God.
Good?
You know, alive, black. Thank God.
That's a blessing within itself, right?
So, you know, it's the World Cup. You know, my team just got smacked. So,
Oh yeah.
you know, our team
Just got smacked, you know, it's okay. It's still love. And we're still proud.
You know, it's
Right,
okay.
not a problem. So would you consider yourself creative of some sort?
In a way,
In a way?
kind of.
Yeah? So what would you say you consider black music to be? What is black music to you? What is black music? What is black music to you?
Black music is such a wide Caribbean, North to America, South Africa, Africa. They go from anything to I'm tasting compa music or we'll do smooth jazz. Then we got the multiple different sounds of Africa.
Right.
So, you know, it could be a whole bunch of stuff. It's an endless variety. We go far enough into it, most of the genres that we don't even think of black genres, rock, all that good stuff.
Right.
It's black to the
Originated.
core, you know?
Exactly.
So, a whole bunch of stuff. For films,
So let's say, did you see Sinners?
yeah.
Did you see Sinners? Did you see Sinners? Did you see Sinners?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Sinners? What do you think that Sinners, the film coming out, did for us people? Like, what do you think it showed, you know?
I ain't glad we needed that. I ain't gonna lie. Like, that different. I ain't glad we needed that. I ain't gonna lie. Like, that different. This is different, you know how I feel like black movies, you know, it's always typical. Oh, someone in the hood
Struggling,
you
yeah,
know,
criminal,
or the slave
yeah,
movie,
slave movie,
you know,
yeah, slave movie, slave movie, a slave movie.
you know. So I feel like mixing up some, what's the word? Like fantasy, you know, like mixing that up while keeping some historical roots, stuff like that. I was looking for the watch.
Yeah, they did a good
I remember when that movie came out, I just never was going crazy about it. I just want to watch it by myself. Like, I can't just went up and watch the matinee, watch it, you know, the great movie, bad stuff like that. I'm trying to think of other black films. There's a whole bunch, but I'm drawing a blank on it. I'm drawing a blank.
I will say they did a good job of showing like black brothers, especially as like using their wits and charisma and personality to outsmart, you know, the opposing sides and like get the upper hand between them. That was really good for the culture for sure. And like, what would you consider like, what is a black genre? I feel like you kind of touched up on this with the music a little bit. You kind of said that there's a vast range, especially from rock, pop, you know, R&B, rap.
A black genre, everything a black genre.
Everything, literally.
Like, I hear it a lot. Like, you hear a lot of people say black Americans don't got culture. But it's like, that's the biggest culture in the world. You're trying to walk, talk, dress like black people. Dress like black people. Like black people. I don't care where you go to. I'm not like saying nothing wrong with it. You go to Spanish, Latino, Spanish countries, you go to European countries, you look at the way they dress, talk, walk. It's all inspired. Like you can see the
inspiration.
Like where y'all learn that from? Like, where y'all see that? I'm seeing people way in. It'll be someone in Uzbekistan, someplace you never heard of area. So it's like I feel like life itself is a black genre. Everything.
I feel like we inspire life and creativity,
yeah,
and
sure.
people definitely find their inspiration in food.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And that's everywhere and anywhere. I feel like when it comes to creativity, when it comes to anything really.
New fashion, especially.
Yeah. It all
ties down.
Yeah, it all boils down to blackness. You know, the blackness. You know, so.
Happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah, that was tough. Y'all killed that little interview. That was good.
Nice.
Very
most people in our scene and our community, people like Rod Wave, people like to hate on Rod Wave, but he's so around the Americans, bro. Even if it's like, it doesn't have to be like soul music, it could be hip hop. You know, people like Rod Wave, people like to hate on Rod Wave, but he's soulful. Like most people in our scene and our community who make music, they put their heart and their experiences and their pain and their happiness and everything into it. So I would say that's what black music is to me.
And I feel like for black film, black film is love, because even through like the common denominator of all the films, through all the trauma, the hurt, the highs, the lows, there's one common denominator of love. We all love each other, we all support each other, and we all love each other, we all support each other, and we carry each other, you know, through it all. So I feel like at the end of the day, black film is love. Yeah. And black genre? Ooh. I feel like black genre in itself is history. Yeah. History of the ancestors, the past showing up in the present also. And the fact that it's always a reoccurring pattern constantly, but the fact that we overcome it every single time. So black film, black genre is history, yeah.
I appreciate y'all.
Thank you. I gotta go swim.
What's your name?
Oh, I'm Job.
Job?
My name is Onyx.
Onyx.
Yeah.
Onyx.
Why y'all trying to be
Have a
so
good
like?
night.
They trying to be like.
This my bestie. Alright, I love you.
Take like one face this way and then having the flag.
Hello, hello, hello. We are evidence of things unseen. Thanks for coming to our little episode preview. This episode's a little different than what we usually do. It's a bit of a collaboration with some work we're doing with the University of Maryland. But before we really get into that, first we want to give thanks to the Coup for their beautiful poem and their conversation on death and celebration, and Masisi for the space, and just generally for having y'all come through and, you know, talk about some things with us. I'm Jayvyn, if y'all don't know who I am. Yeah. And what we were showing you today is some film, media, and interviews we've been putting together, some audio productions we've been going over for the last year. And this next segment of our episode, we want to do more of a deep dive on the literature and influences that really ground the work we're doing and why we're even doing this in the first place. So I'll let my partner Katia introduce herself and we'll get going.
Hi everybody, my name is Katia. I'm a doctoral student and researcher at the University of Maryland, and I'm working here with Jayvyn on our project, which is kind of like the title of this episode, Black Iconography, Reprogramming the Stage. And yeah, so this project is kind of like this multimedia kind of like mesh of different like medias and films and sounds and stuff like that around the topic of celebration for Black artistry and representation. We're focusing on the politics of representation, but also the politics of how Black people, specifically Black artists, are able to get their flowers. Essentially, what does it mean to be a Black creative? What does it mean to be a Black icon? What does it mean to be in the Black media space or the music space and have such a distinct artistry and be able to make such genre-breaking and cultural-defining art, but then also be having to kind of stifle yourself and restrict yourself in predominantly white institutions that don't quite understand the work that you're doing, nor understand your people or your background, and then having to kind of adjust to that because that is the only way for you to get credibility within the current culture that we're living in. So this is kind of what a lot of Black iconography is about. It's around the topic of Blackness, but then also the topic of who we are as artists and what do we deserve and the rights that should be given to us for the work that we do because we are the ones defining culture.
Yeah, I second that. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the University of Maryland, kind of what you're doing there and what BCaT is?
Yeah, so within this project, we're working with the University of Maryland, specifically within the Black Communication and Technology Lab. And this lab is specifically, we're on a project called the Automating Black Joy Project. And the point of the project is to kind of talk about, Black joy, but then also Black joy in the segments of society and culture. Specifically, how Black joy is seen through surveillance, how it's categorized through AI, how it's just commodified within popular culture, but then also in general in the world. So again, within this topic of celebration in Black iconography, this project is in collaboration with the University of Maryland and the Black Communication and Technology Lab. And the work that we're kind of doing is we wanting to kind of take this outside of academia because we can do all the research and publish it behind a paywall and that can kind of gain traction, but our work is within the community, and we want to make sure that the community has access to it, but not only have access, but is heavily involved in the work that we're doing. So we're kind of out here to kind of mostly promote the research that we're doing, but we're also wanting to get the community involved in how the research is being shaped as well. So you guys are basically a part of the research that we're currently doing. So you can see yourself as research collaborators in a sense. And through the University of Maryland, we're kind of going to take everything that we filmed and everything that we've collected and kind of create maybe this online segment or series where more people can have access to it, and to kind of continue this topic about Black iconography and Black celebration and how we as Black artists should be able to get the cultural value and the rights that we deserve, essentially. Yeah. So, the next word, Black genre. Yeah. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Black genre, and I'm gonna give it to Jayvyn.
So yeah, we're gonna get real deep into some little texts and literature and whatnot. It's not all that deep, but it is important to the work we're doing. We showed you the media first because we felt like it was important to ground something in something more effective and aesthetic. But the sort of work and text we're going through is also a very important aspect that structures why we're even doing things in the way we're doing them. So while I was going over, and we were going over these sort of questions of Black iconography, award systems, and the idea of Black art in general and how we award Black art, we were having conversations, that are familiar, ones that have been happening for a long time. Like if anybody's familiar with Tyler, the Creator, talking about being placed in urban categories, certain artists being placed only in rap categories, or whether or not we're able to position ourselves outside of the typical Black genre. And I became curious about this idea of the Black genre and what it may mean. if maybe you're able to pick up in some of the interviews, a lot of the times I was asking questions like, what is a black film, what is black music, and what is a black genre? And even when people, at times when we were confused, like, what type of black film, what type of black music, I left it to them to interpret that question, mainly because I was curious how they felt about those definitions. So now I want to kind of go through the sort of work I was piecing together when I was investigating this question. And a lot of different works came to mind. One of particular interest that I feel like really sets the groundwork and framework for this idea of a black genre is Saidiya Hartman's Scenes of Subjection. The title is really a dead giveaway, and the way she's beginning or already talking about how black folks are told to perform or made to perform their identity in blackness proper, or rather this idea of how blackness is a performance, and how in this performance there are these scenes of subjection that black folk are continuously put through as a way of framing and sort of positioning black people as chattel, as capital, as something to use. So I want to go through a couple of quotes. This first one kind of gets into this idea of minstrelity and melodrama. Hartman says, despite the difference between their respective conventions and stylistic devices, the uses made of the black body established continuities between minstrelsy and melodrama that surpass their generic differences. I particularly like this quote because of the way in which there's an emphasis on these two opposing depictions of blackness, one as jolly, as one as almost jolly to the point of humiliation, and then melodrama, this obscure sadness, obscure pain that goes unresolved most of the time. And to me, it's very interesting, especially when we talk about films and black films and what is possible to be a black film. If some people heard some of the responses by folks in the interviews, they'd say things like Sinners or Moonlight and these other types of conversations. And I think that there's a very strong drive for people to think outside of what is the usual depiction of black folk, especially within our own communal spaces, and yet we don't see those forms of representation in award systems. Then this next quote is about the coffle. The pageantry of the coffle, stepping up lively on the auction block, going before the master, and the black face of minstrelsy and melodrama all evidence the entanglements of terror and enjoyment. Above all, the simulated jollity and coerced festivity of the slave trade and the instrumental recreations of the plantation management document the investment in and obsession with black enjoyment, and the significance of these orchestrated amusements as a part of a larger effort to disseminate the extreme violence of the institution and disavow the pain of captivity. Hartman's talking about the way in which, when slaves were brought to the auction block, they would be literally pageant. They would walk miles in chains and be given drags of clothes or no clothes. But up until the point they got close to the place that they would be sold, the master would literally tell them, it's time for you to be happy. It's time for you to start singing and dancing. We're actually gonna change your clothes. Because there was a particular awareness of their capital in the fact that you cannot sell slaves on the auction block if they just look sad all the time. You had to procure this sense of entertainment and enjoyment to position the black body in a way that said, you are happy with your condition. And to me, this is one of the first moments of performance, the first instance of black films, the first sort of demonstration of black entertainment. And Hartman goes into this very poignant idea of the economy of enjoyment. She says, to take delight in, to use, and to possess are inextricably linked. And moreover, that enjoyment entails everything from the use of one's possessions to the value of witness, which cannot be considered an incorporeal hereditariment, like hereditary, or illusory inheritance of chattel slavery. I particularly think that this idea of the economy of enjoyment is interesting because Hartman is talking about the ways in which enjoyment, pleasure, delight, and joy are caught up in this very complicated relationship of pain. Like I said, minstrelity and melodrama are two sides of the same coin, that when we feel pain and pleasure, they're not just objective, like immediately understood things. They're very complicated. At sometimes, in the same way death is celebration, and this conversation of the coup into our conversation of celebration is the same conversation. And how when white folk would sort of engage in this viewership, in this witness of slaves being clearly in a position of domination and oppression, there was this inherent and invested enjoyment behind it. And that the enjoyment of slaves knowing I'm about to be separated from my family by people I love, by people I know, and potentially never see them again. And yet I'm told to stand up here and dance.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, like, continuing the conversation of Black genre, like, I kind of want you guys to take introspect a little bit in, like, what do you define as, like, a Black genre, particularly, like, in film? Is it, like, a Black director has to be in charge? Is it an all-Black cast? Does it have to tackle, like, Black subjects? Because we're, like, all in agreement with, like, a movie like Sinners is a Black film, or a movie like Moonlight is a Black film. But what about a Goofy movie? Do people consider that movie a Black film? Or, like, like, you kind of have to think about, is the film just have to be about Blackness, or does it have to be, like, a Black person needs to be kind of in charge of it? And then it also gets into the question of just, like, our definitions of Black films are also kind of being catered to us by predominantly white institutions. Because you have these films that are maybe Black-led or have a majority of Black cast, but it's run by a predominantly white studio. And the white studios are in charge of, like, what films are going to give, like, what films are they going to fund and what films they're going to give dollars to. So when we're talking about the economics of representation and the economics of these ideas of genre, these majority white studios that are run by majority, like, white men are in charge of how we view Blackness, because they're the ones funding the films that are out there and the films that are being heavily promoted. So even when we're going to films like Sinners and Moonlight, and how a lot of them are essentially tackling the Black identity, but there isn't a variety or a more diverse way of viewing Blackness, because it's all being catered towards a specific group of people, because it's being controlled by a specific group of people. That gets into a lot of the quotes that Jayvyn said about minstrelsy and the master, and how they're telling the slave to smile and using the slave as this form of entertainment, because they're in charge of how the slaves particularly kind of views themselves and perception.
Yeah, entirely. Because I didn't ground that in a conversation of just to talk about, like, what was happening at a certain period of time, but to really talk about how the industry is operating and where it's coming from. Another author that was of interest to me was Bell Hooks. She has this chapter called Eating the Other, and I think it connects really well to Hartman's conversation of this economy of enjoyment, this complicated relationship of pain and pleasure, but then also how that's tied up into this idea of looking and seeing each other. And but Bell Hooks takes this into a sort of movement, a generation after, to talk about how society post-antebellum, post-integration, is sort of operating, and how white folk are now operating differently when they can't profess their hate as much, when they sort of have to accept diversity, but how they still deal with these sort of feelings of superiority. So I began to ask myself these questions. How does the integration of Black folk into society affect representations of Black people on the screen? How does that change the sort of structural relationships of the master-slave dynamic? And how does the desire for the other, or non-white folk, or other people in general, help describe the experience of culture and society when watching modern Black films together, whatever we consider Black films, but together in the sense that when we vote on them, when they become pop culture, when we have something to say about them on Twitter. So I'll read some more quotes, not to talk your ear off, but some Bell Hooks quotes, where she says, "Not all are attuned to those aspects of their sexual fantasies that irrevocably link them to collective white racist domination. They believe their desire for contact represents a progressive change in white attitudes towards non-whites. They do not see themselves as perpetrating racism. To them, the most potent indication of that change is the frank expression of longing, the open declaration of desire, the need to be intimate with dark others. The point is to be changed by this convergence of pleasure and otherness. One Dares acts on the assumption that the exploration into the world of difference, into the body of the other, will provide a greater, more intense pleasure than any that exists in the ordinary world of one's familiar racial group. To give some context, Bell Hooks is talking about American society in a particular time period in which I guess white folk were feeling a little bit of their blandness. They're like, damn, like, we're type bored with America. And we feel like we need something else to exercise a greater form of pleasure and entertainment or excitement. And Bell Hooks says, like, in this space of integration, that the black body, the othered body, becomes that in the way we fetishize it, in the way that whiteness invests itself into fetishizing black people. And so much so that they believe that the way they transcend their issues with black folk is to be overly invested in this sort of sexual fantasy of the body. And I take that to be an interesting discourse when placed in the condition of film and media, that I ask this question: what is it like for non-black people to watch us on the screens? Like, what does that investment, that desire, that intimacy begin to look like for them? What sort of conversations or economies of enjoyment begin to happen? Hartman then says, films offer a version of racial pluralism that challenges racism by suggesting that the white male's life will be richer, more pleasurable if he accepts diversity. Yet it also offers a model of change that still leaves a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy intact. Though no longer based on coercive domination of black people, it insists that the white male desire must be sustained by the labor, in this case the heart, of a dark other. The fantasy, of course, is that this labor will no longer be exacted via domination, but will be given willingly. Not surprisingly, most black folks talked about this film as racist. That last part is particularly about a specific film she's inquiring on, in the ways in which there's a difference between white folk viewing people or black folk on the screen and how black people view themselves on the screen. And I particularly found that of interest when Bell Hooks gets into this idea of the oppositional gaze. She talks about the ways in which black people did not just accept the images that were on the screen, that we sort of refused these ideas and stereotypes and representations. And it again reminds me of Hartman in the way that I've always heard about when black people were on auction blocks and had to perform blackface, that there were subtle ways in which they undermined white crowds. And I think about this in a similar way, but kind of on the flip side, where we're not always performing, but we're told to be spectators. We're told to watch these representations of ourselves that we know aren't true. Bell Hooks says, spaces of agency exist for black people where we can both interrogate the gaze of the other, but also look back and at one another, naming what we see. The gaze has been a site of resistance for colonized black people globally. There's another quote I really want to read, where Hartman says, the power of discourse to do violence to people, of violence which is material and physical, although produced by abstract and scientific discourses, as well as discourses of the mass media. With the possible exception of early race movies, black female spectators had to develop looking relations within a cinematic context that constructs their presence as absence, that denies the body of the black female so as to perpetrate white supremacy, and with it a phallocentric spectatorship where the woman had to be looked at and desired as white. Hartman's specifically talking about the ways in which, even when black male filmmakers would make films, they would make specific representations of black women that black women themselves didn't accept. She specifically mentions this because of the ways in which black male filmmakers would represent white women, and like I said, this sort of economy of enjoyment, the ways in which black men would sort of use the position of white women in their films to explore this sexual fantasy that maybe for them operated as a form of liberation, as a way to overcome the position that they were in, but also depended on a certain position and representation of black women that when black women would see it, simply just did not accept. To move into this next segment, Katia can speak to what they were interested in, but it was kind of this discussion of the table, and it's kind of why we set things up in the space to kind of invite people to come sit down and talk and also just try to have a conversation. So I'll pass the mic to her.
Yeah, so going from black genre, this section we're gonna talk a little bit about what does it mean to basically get a seat at the table. And a lot of people talk about this within black popular culture, opening the door, a seat at the table, invited to the cookout, stuff like that. And it just goes into the larger conversation about this politics of representation. There's this quote from this scholar named I think it's Laura Bruce, and he made this book called How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind. And he basically says, why long for a seat at the table when you can carry your meal outside? I like it out here under open sky. So it gets into the conversation of just like, you have a lot of these black artists, but then just like black people in general, we're always trying to kind of Du Bois call it the canon, where they're trying to strive for a better world, where we have like political rights and we're equal to the white man, and we have the resources and access to, and we're seen as people. And a lot of that goes into this conversation of having a seat at the table, going against reaching the glass ceiling, inviting people to the cookout, stuff like that. And it just goes into the conversation of like, what exactly do we mean when we're talking about a seat at the table? What does it require to get a seat? What does it require to get through the door? What does it mean to open the door for others? When you're at the table, how are you going to manner yourselves? Who are the people at the table? When you're going to a place, you're always going to ask like, who's going to be there? Those types of like conversations when we're talking about this community that's being formed, but then we're also talking about this larger conversation of gatekeeping. For example, raise your hand if you're a fan of Tyler Perry. Okay. So that gets to the conversation of like Tyler Perry, this a little bit of a controversial figure. I'm gonna be honest, since we're Tyler Perry fans in the room, I'm gonna try not to talk trash about him. But we have Tyler Perry, this basically big media mogul within like black popular culture, and he seemingly has done a lot for black culture. Producing a lot of black media, and a lot of black like artists working today have worked for Tyler Perry Studios. But it just also gets into this conversation of the black genre. What does it mean for black films? And then the films that are being created, like what does that have a larger conversation of representation? When we get to a level of being like a millionaire or a billionaire, where we have like these black billionaires like Rihanna and Oprah, what does that mean when you're at the table and you're essentially trying to bring your people with you? Like, how does that conversation go about? In larger popular media, they're always talking about like getting through the door and opening the door for others, getting invited to a seat at the table. And again, others are talking about building their own table and trying to do it that way. But then you also just get into like this history of black culture where we essentially did build our own table, where you have like these towns that were, these predominantly black owned towns that were made after Reconstruction, and all of these like HBCUs and all of these like black popular culture things that were brought up during segregation, and a lot of it being teared down, majority because of like white mobs, but then also just a lot of it kind of eating amongst itself, because you have this larger conversation with recently what happened with Howard and how they got rid of a lot of their students. So you have like these conversations of just like, when black people are, what does it mean when we have conversation of black people in power? I know Ta-Nehisi Coates talks a lot about this when it came to the recent presidential election with Kamala and Palestine, and what does that mean to be a black political figure in society today and not renounce genocide? So when we're talking about, again, black genre and how a lot of white society kind of constructs how a lot of black genre is seen and what black genre means, and that in of itself, when we do have people in power, specifically black people in power, who are able to cater what the black genre is along with their white counterparts, what does that say when they're not catering it towards the most marginalized person within their specific culture, but instead are just conforming to what the white population or majority has to say because they're the one in power? I don't know if I have any specific quotes here. There's this one quote of Tyler Perry when he did a speech for the Black Cinema and Television award show, where he was like, "It is easy to divide us, That means it is so easy to conquer us if we can take our collective power and stand together. You won't be sitting around hearing stuff about Oscar so white because you would have created a table not only for you, but for everybody else. So that's what I've been trying to do in Atlanta, create a table for all of us. And that goes again to the conversation of Tyler Perry creating Tyler Perry Studios, which is one of the largest studios I think right now that exists in Atlanta that's majority producing black films, or essentially what we deem as black films and black productions. And it goes to the conversation of just when we're talking about building our own table, or being invited to the table, or kind of building our own forms of representation. How are we going to go about that? And in larger conversation, you're just if a table exists, if there's a seat at the table, there's also people who probably won't be invited. And I don't necessarily see that also as a bad thing. I think it can be seen as more of a neutral kind of invitation, of where there are certain topics or there are certain people that we don't want to get involved with, I guess. When it comes to who you invite within your community, you want your community to kind of be an open space, and whoever's against that, you obviously don't want to invite them. So I think when we're having this conversation of a seat at the table, or building our own tables, you are actively choosing who you want to invite and who you want to bring into that space. And again, it's seen as a negative thing because for the history of time, marginalized people have not been invited, but I think we can get into a much more distinctive conversation when we talk about essentially what do we value as a society, and how are we going to build a table where people are given access, but also people aren't essentially taken advantage of or erased throughout time. Our first question is, do you think a Goofy movie is a black movie, and why?
Anybody want to answer? Show love.
Hello. I don't think. Hello? Yo. Go ahead. I think Goofy movie is definitely a black movie, 100%. I think even if it only speaks to the type of people who watch the movie, cause if you were to go and be to the mic, okay, yeah, I feel just being socialized black and having a black childhood, there are just things that you particularly indulged in that if you were to go outside of our experience, people did not indulge in that. If you ask people if they've even seen the Goofy movie, it's something that is a lot more persistent amongst people that look like me. But then when you get into the content of the movie, and I think specifically fatherhood and masculinity, and even the character Goofy amongst Disney, it's very obvious that it's speaking to a black experience, or at least in my opinion. But I think it just gets into if you speak to it in a stereotypical sense, fatherhood in the black community is maybe I guess complex. So Goofy, and again Max, I believe his name is it's coming of age, and he's looking to come into his own masculinity, and he almost rejects his father's perspective of masculinity because Goofy's Goofy, but he's there and he's consistent, and I think it's more than it's a good representation of one. It is a representation of fatherhood in black spaces where I think it can be very abject.
Anybody else want to give a response?
I'd like to say, obviously, the Goofy movie is a black movie. It is a black film, and I think that there is black iconography within the Goofy movie. I do think there's a statement to be said about like the general iconography of like the 70s and 80s, which is like what's parodied, well, not parodied, but like shown of Goofy's time in college. The afro, like the dancing, the disco music, like I think these are things that we could very easily define as like black genres, and like the imagery is very black. But I do think there is something also to be said about the only characters being displayed, the only way a black movie coming out from Disney, them being animals. I think that's also a very common theme that happens a lot. Like, for example, Tiana, the Disney princess, a very, like, obviously actually black Disney princess. For most of the movie, she's a fucking frog. Like, so I do think that's another, like, it actually lends more to it being a black movie. So, yeah, that's my statement on it.
All right. Thank you guys so much. That was Evidence of Things Unseen and BCaT. Yeah. It's our collaboration episode 3. We hope you guys enjoyed. Please take food and drinks if you guys want. I know the patties are a little cold, but thank you guys for coming.